Today we're going to talk about councillors. As we discussed in our last episode, when you join Dublin City Council, there's no real onboarding or induction to the role and you're thrown straight into the deep end. It's like applying for a job you don't really understand, getting it, and then having no one tell you how it works, what your role is, or what success looks like. So to help me understand the role, I've created a framework which we'll be revisiting regularly throughout the series. And very simply, it's a pyramid with 3 tiers. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have tier 3, which is the foundation of being a councillor. This is everything that comes to mind when someone says they're a councillor, and it's essentially how you serve your community on a daily basis. It's people reaching out to ask for assistance with leaves, footpaths, potholes, housing applications, parking, and all those sorts of things. Tier 3 is the bread and butter of being a councillor. And while these things may sound small and menial, they can really impact people's lives and they really piss people off. For example, if you're an older person who can't leave their house because of a broken footpath outside, your life is severely impacted. And often the only person you can turn to in that situation is your councillor. In the middle of the pyramid, we have tier 2, which is more strategic work that generally looks at a project or policy that affects a wider area as opposed to dealing with an individual query from a constituent. A good example here is councillors coming together to try and develop something like a park, a library, or a community space. It's something that will meaningfully impact the area in a positive way. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have tier 1, which is all about setting a strategic vision for Dublin and asking questions like, how do we make Dublin the best place to raise a child, the best place to start a business, a clean, safe, thriving capital city with world-class housing, transport, infrastructure, and culture. But when you take a step back and look deeper into these tiers, there's a huge opportunity in how councillors are spending our time across each of them. Right now, we spend about 75% of our time in tier 3, 20% of our time in tier 2, and only about 5% of our time in tier 1. Tier 3 gets most of our time and attention because it's where we receive the highest volume of emails and it's where we can actually get things done most of the time. For example, last week somebody reached out about a traffic bollard being damaged along the canal. I forwarded that to the relevant council team and it was fixed 2 days later. There are plenty of requests that we unfortunately can't help with, especially around housing. But in general, we can deal with a tier 3 issue pretty effectively. However, when we do this, we are only treating a symptom of a larger disease. And the disease is a system that is not working properly. We rarely take a step back and look at the systems and processes that Dublin City Council has in place that is causing these issues to arise in the first place. In other words, there is no strategic reform from the work that we are doing into the council's ways of working that addresses the underlying issue. And the reason for this is that the further you go up the pyramid, the more difficult it becomes, which is why we spend the majority of our time in tier 3. In our next episode, we'll dig deeper into why this is happening by looking at the structure of the role, the incentives in place for councillors, and why it is so hard to effect real change.